Okay, the moment has arrived for you to complete this assignment. So from the go to your Dropbox, and that's where you just got so busy in that assignment box that I just moved it to the Dropbox for your instructions. And yeah, I may change some of the font here. You're looking at teacher mode, but you get the idea. Um, you are now going to, from your 7 organisms, you're going to create your phylogenetic tree. So these are detailed instructions that if, like I'm creating this video now to help you, and it'll be linked in here. But you could also go through, and if you're really comfortable with, going and figuring this out on your own, I've tried to include detailed written instructions as well. So between the two of them, you should be able to be quite successful in this assignment. So you're going to build a branching system. You can see here I've got my very simplified, very rough draft version of how I created it for the 7 organisms. I just chose 7 organisms. And this is the idea that you're after. Now I've highlighted it and I've done some things and it's a very rough draft, but I want you to at least see that pen to paper is my favorite, but you can do it on computer, that you can create this branching system that's going to eventually go from down, I don't know if you can see that, that says eukaryote at the bottom, up to your species that you have chosen. So to get there, you've been learning a lot of language through the missions. And I'll just go through a few things with you. Reptilia is a branching that happens, and that's a proper name, but it's actually reptiles. Birds, aves, green plants, chordata is something that spinal cord. Placenta mammals is one of your missions, interactives, but the actual proper name is Eutheria. So there's animals, there's angiosperms, which are flowering plants. They describe dinosaurs as dinosauria, but you get the idea, right? You're seeing this language. Amniotes was one of the um, missions, and they actually describe it as amniota. So I've included those words there to help you out so that you don't get bogged down in the language because that can sure affect um, the ease of doing this assignment. And then I go through and I have some descriptions and there's a rubric, and I'm just going to leave that to you. These are the thinking questions that are at the end. But let's just quickly go to the lab so I can get you started on how you're going to complete this assignment. So I would highly recommend you do a rough copy on paper, um, just so that you can figure out the spacing and then transfer it, either do it on the computer. I couldn't do it on the computer. That's why I just went to paper, or you can do it on paper, whichever works best for you. Okay, so if I'm going to go first into choosing my mammals, I'll do a mammal and then I might do a plant, so I can show you how the division is different. So I'm going to click my platypus, but now I'm going to slow this down. Remember, when you picture your organism, you let it just quickly zoom in and get to that organism. But I want you to slow things down because the start of your evolutionary tree, your sorry, I just call it evolutionary tree, is eukaryotes. Now, there is information that you can click on here that if you wanted to say, oh, I want to know about what a eukaryote, that talks about the nucleus, having the nucleus in a cell, and they happen to have a human cheek cell here. So that's not required for this. We really just want you to appreciate the size of this tree and how much branching there is in order to get to your actual species. So I'm going to write eukaryotes because I recognize that word. I recognize that language, and this is what this is about. So then I'm going to start scrolling, zooming in, and it's going. I'm watching up here. You see my platypus was bouncing here, so I actually know it's going to go into this branch here. But I'm not going to write this word down because we haven't talked about those. I mean, people go to university for like 4 years on these in studying um, this evolutionary tree. So we're just getting an introduction to it, and so we are simplifying this. So now I do mention though in the level 4, if you want to check that out, I do mention about adding additional terms, and so maybe that's a term you want to add. But I'll leave that up to you. So then I'm scrolling in and I'm looking because here it was bouncing up here. So I'm kind of looking at this language here and I'm like, I know I don't recognize that. And I'm just slowing it down. And it's actually, this is, time. It's going through time. Oh, there I recognize something, animals. So I would write that down for animals. And I'll just go back and I'll show you on my example here. I'll make this nice and big. You can see eukaryotes, and you can see I have my first branch. And there I've written the word animals. So that's my first branch. Now, is there other branches between this? Sure, there is. But we're not concerned about those. We're just going to go with the language that we're comfortable with. So my first branch happens in the word that I recognize is animals. So we go from eukaryotes to animals, and then I'm going to keep scrolling through, and I'm looking at it's bouncing over here, so I'm following this one, this branch over here, and it's giving me years, how many million years ago. So those would be like fossil records. 800. Oh, wait a minute. Back up this web. There's another one I recognize, bilateria or bilateral symmetry, which you've done in some of your missions, in one of your missions. So if I go back here and I'm looking at my rough copy I did, there I've written bilateria. Actually, I even wrote down, because this is my note, I wrote down where you actually learned that to make sure that everything was fair and on the up and up. So there's another, I don't know whether you see where my cursor is, but I'm circling it there. So there's another branch. So from you're going along in animals, and then it branches off. There'll be other branches going the other way. You can add those if you want. I didn't. But know that from animals to the bilateral symmetry, there is a branching that occurs. I hope that makes sense. So then I'm going to continue on in my platypus, and I'm looking, I see it bouncing up here. So here's a branching here happens with this word here. I don't recognize that. Oh, but there's a word that Miss Webb had, although we didn't talk about that. But Cordata is, you can research that. It talks about this, the spinal column, the spinal cord. Is a term that you want to include because I had it in the list. So if you look here on my sample, you can see there's another branch. Now I put the word up here, but the branching from bilateral symmetry to there's a branching that happens where species are more specialized and they're called chordata. Okay, so all these little jogs or curves, and it is important that you show these curves or bends, are the characteristics have changed, and the branching has split. Okay, so in chordata, you can see there's two splits that happen here, but we're going to just keep following. We're going to follow this branch now. So we're on this chordata branch now, and we're going to keep going through. And oh, there's another one I recognize, animals with skulls. Now, when I'm recording this, you may not have already done that one, but it's in one of the missions. I can't remember which one, where it talks about skulls. And we look at skulls and we look at eye placement and size of skull and things like that. So you want to include that one. So if I go back, you can see there's my branch right there, the skulls, craniata, and there's another bend in another branch that's happening. And I really want to see that bend, although see how they show this nice bend? You really want to be clear to say, yep, this web, I'm telling you, I know it branches off. So then we're going to zoom in. Oh, there's another one. Vertebrates, animals with backbones. There is some explanation here if you wanted to check on it. And they will have pictures with this, but it's not required. So I'm going to keep going, and I can see my platypus is bouncing up here. So I'm zooming in, and then I get to these nodes. No, we didn't talk about nodes. We didn't talk about nodes. Do I recognize that language? No. We didn't talk about I'm on this branch. It looks like I'm up here now on this branch. And no, I'm looking at this language. I don't recognize it. Don't recognize it. Again, obviously there's more complexity to this, so you can appreciate that, but I'm not requiring you to do that. Terrestrial vertebrates, you could add that. I didn't actually add that because I didn't, but you could add branches if you wanted to. I'm not saying that you can't add them, but I'm doing the simplified versions. Tetrapoda, nope, that's not. That's interesting. Okay. So I'm just showing you how I was like, okay, reptilia. Is there reptilia? Oh, no, but there is amniota, which is the amniote. So I'd write that one down. Whoops, because I recognize that one. And backing up, amniota. No, don't recognize those words. We're getting really close. Nope, nope. Ah, mammalia. Okay, so there's mammalia. I recognize that one. So I'd go back here and I can see where I've got the division here. There's a branching that goes off from mammalia. And for my other organisms, you can see I've got different colored lines for them. That's part of the assessment, where it looks like there's some branching, quite a bit of branching off that happens between the amniotes and the mammalias and the reptilias, which leads to the dinosaurs and the birds. So that's kind of interesting. So there's a branch. So there's a word that you would want to add into your branch. And then I'm there. So then if I go back, I can see I actually have platypus written up there, and that's how the platypus ends. Okay. Now this is for my species that I chose. Obviously yours is going to be different. So let's just quickly go, because I know these are getting long. Let's just quickly go to I wanted to do plant. And I think earlier I did a tulip. So I clicked on tulip and it's gonna take me out. Don't watch if it makes you nauseous. I just love watching it though. It's just, I mean, isn't life a beautiful thing? The diversity, the connections, all of these species are connected, whoops, to that last universal common ancestor way back here, the beginning of life. So now I'm going to zoom in and I'm going into eukaryotes and I'm looking at my tulip and I'm looking for words. Oh, I could, plante. I could probably have added that one because I actually added green plants. But if I go back, I could have done a branch here that had plante, but I did green plants. Do you see how there's lots of flexibility, but you do have to have the main words that I talked about just to keep you on track. Okay, so now I'm looking, I can see my plants bouncing up here. So I'm looking for words as I go through all this branching that's occurred. I'm not going to record that branch. I'm not going to record that branch. Land plants. I'm not going to include that, but that might be a good one for my level 4 to include, an extra branch. Then I'm going through. I don't know whether there is another division. I was hoping they would talk about flowering. Oh, actually, no, that's not true. They do. Seed plants, that's not, we didn't go into seeds, but we did go into flowers. So let's get up here. It talks about right here, angiosperms, flowering plants. So because we talked about the flowers, the petals in one of the mission statements, angiosperms are called flowering plants. So I want you to include that one. If your plant takes you there, you have to go through it first to see if your plant's going to do that. And then there's monocots from your earlier grades. You might recognize that word, but I do want you to talk about, include the branching of the monocotyledons, the monocots. And then we keep going. And There it is. Then we hit tulip. So if I go back here, I can see there's my division for my tulip. You see, I just got the one side of the branch and I didn't include both. So that should be enough to help you out um, with the assignment. Super, I think it's a super fun exercise and just really gives you an appreciation of, of the diversity and the number of organisms that are on our planet. Okay, have fun.